Now, let's just look a bit back to last week. That was on Thursday when we had the Minister of Power give an assessment during the ministerial briefing assessment that we had, and we took it live here on Channels Television. And he did, that's the Minister of Power, and he did share some achievements by his ministry. One of it is that 150 million Nigerians now have access to adequate electricity. That's what the minister said. And that tariff reforms have been slashed by 1.1 trillion naira. And then, of course, there was a question about the 2 trillion naira Genco's debts to be paid by the federal government in December. Now, let's get an expertise on all of this as somewhat get an objective conversation. We're doing that with Professor Yemi Oke, SAN. He's the Professor of Energy and Electricity Law with the University of Lagos, joins us from Leeds. Professor Oke, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, and sincere thanks for having me.
Great. So I don't know, you must have seen or read excerpts from what the minister said. I think top on the list is that 150 million Nigerians now have adequate electricity. I wonder what your thoughts are if you were to assess the workings of the ministry so far.
Realistically, I read the briefing and I later viewed the video, the entirety of the media briefing of the Minister of Power. Of course, we've had a number of commendable achievements under its regime, which I will also allude to in the course of my interaction with you. But I want to slightly amend the statement saying 150 million Nigerians have access to adequate electricity, because when you talk of adequacy of power, it's in relative terms. And if you say we have increased access, I agree with the Honorable Minister to that extent, due to no fault of his or the current administration. We've been struggling with access, no doubt. Over time, we've had increase in access, but not sufficient. It can never be sufficient. Access in the sense of the recharacterization of the grid, as well as the structuring of the grid, as well as the characterization of the bands, where we have band A, band B. And the Honorable Minister also alluded to the fact that we've had increase in earnings of about 700 billion because of the recharacterization of the band structure. I agree with that. What we also need to bear in mind is that over time, we've had remarkable increase in liquidity in the power sector, which was a huge challenge. These schools have more funds now, so meaning the vulnerability levels of the discourse are actually declining. We've also, as experts, we've also tracked the frequency of grid collapses. It's actually on the decline. It's going south. No, we normally would have had like 16, 17 average. Last year, we had about actual 10, but one hyped collapse, which would have been 11. But this year, we haven't had any significant collapses in the national grid. And I want to identify that to be a very positive development, because we're witnessing appreciable levels of grid restructuring. Recently, we had the coming on board of Nigeria's independent system operator, which is to deal with the system issues, the grid issues, and the rest, like it's done in other countries. These are things we've advocated for several years. I think we're getting there. Methane issue is also there. The government is now still stepping in to bridge the methane gap. But of course, those will ultimately scale up assets. But the adequacy of assets is something that would definitely disagree with my friend. It's not adequate. Well, it's improving, no doubt, because we track all those developments in the power sector. Access is increasing. I give it to him. Then we've had declining trends of grid collapses. we've had improved levels of liquidity at the level of the discos. But we're still struggling with the regulatory environment and power sector there, which are questions I guess we'll still go to bring up in the course of our conversation so that I can shed light on that for Nigerians.
Yeah, before we get to that, Prof, during that meeting, there was also the conversation about infrastructure, connecting generation to distribution. So sometimes we hear that power is wasting because the distribution does not have enough capacity, to take up what has been generated. Could you help us clarify, what the situation is?
Yes, that's what I said. As I said, we've seen noticeable trend at the level of great restructuring. The minister, of course, is somebody that listens because some of these stuff things are sent to him personally and to other colleagues in the power sector. We needed to have restructured our grid configuration several years ago, more than 10 years ago. Now you heard the minister talking about regional grid. It wasn't like we are trained to say, oh, this is Southwest grid, this is Northeast grid, and what have you. No, we need to compartmentalize the grid so that whatever happens at the national grid would not necessarily affect the whole country. If something happens in Oshogbo now, it's going to affect the entirety of the country. No, it's not done anywhere in the world like that. So we're dealing with that. And then we're also dealing with issues of efficiency, grid efficiency. And we've always had issues in the area of transmission losses. Transmission losses is something that a lot of Nigerians are not aware. It's at the table of the federal government, meaning if federal government is responsible for generation at the level of the GenCos to the tune of 1 trillion naira, that's what they're going to pay for. But in the course of wheeling it to the transmission end, there will have been losses in that cost due to transmission dilapidation and what have you. The GenCos will not pay for that because it's like delivering 1 million barrels of crude oil to you, and if there is leakage in the pipeline or the cost of moving it to the end users, they are going to be the one to pay. What the end users get is what is paid for. And also I've identified over time the weak link, the weakest link in the power sector value chain is that of the discos and the consumers. And I'm seeing it on national media, that we still have a lot of losses, a lot of leakages at the levels of the discos and consumers. Increasingly, we still have huge number of bypass, and the discos needs to be taxed to do maximum recovery of what is given to them. So that was one of the reasons why we had a lot of debt overhang in the power sector. So there is that aspect, and then we still have issues of this metering thing that the federal government is trying to deal with, because Nigerians, in as much as Nigerians are willing to pay for electricity, what we said as experts was that it would be illegal to get Nigerians to pay for electricity not consumed. It will also be wrong, criminal, to consume electricity and not pay. So once that gap is breached, an average Nigerian can now modulate or regulate their consumption pattern, which is what the metering initiative is trying to achieve. But we've had a series of metering initiatives from CAPME to MAP and the rest, but the fact is we still have that gap in there. And that should be a challenge for the discos. So how much of the power that is given to the discos is actually paid for? How much of the generated megawatt gets to the end users? How much is paid for per unit? So we need to go back and rework the mathematics. And that was why I agree with the minister when he said we needed to restructure the tariff. We need to restructure the tariff model. In as much as I'm not going to support increasing tariff at this point in time for Nigerians, we need to work in the area of tariff restructuring and efficiency in collection. I still believe that the cost, which the discourse would talk about their, I don't want to go into the technicalities of the cost and other operational issues, is still relatively huge, and they need to improve their collection ratio to what is given to them. And we also noticed the trend in terms of generation, as you rightly said. But the cement is supposed to bring about certain miraculous realities, which I, as a stakeholder, am not as optimistic. Maybe my pessimism is informed by the fact that we've always had issues in terms of what certain entities are supposed to be doing, right from the Manitoba to Siemens. Siemens is needlessly delayed. And I listened to the minister when he talked about the fact that we had the COVID era, and then we had transition from the previous regime to the current regime of Bola Tinubu. But Siemens should have come on board. Siemens is to restructure the grid, bring about better efficiency, to increase the grid capacity to about 20,000 megawatts. Because the idle megawatts that are stranded there may not be able to come on board because of the dilapidated nature of the national grid as is currently structured. But by and large, it's a work in progress, no doubt, but we still have huge challenges in the power sector, particularly the debt overhang as well as the regulatory environment.
And now we have... Now, Prof, we have states that are supposed to be actively involved. I think we are also supposed to be talking about exactly the state's grid and all of that. I wonder if we've had some states domesticate that law, but I don't know if we're feeling the impact yet, or perhaps I'm being too impatient.
Let me confess to you what we are pushing for, because this so-called decentralization thing, people have been accusing me, let me see the problem because you are an advocate of decentralization. Yes, I'm happy that we push aggressively for decentralization of the power sector, because that was what the law said. Even the unamended constitution provided for decentralization, but while implementing it. So we're able to get to that level now, gladly. We push for decentralization of the power sector, we had it. We push for new electricity act, which would now be a piece of legislation to operationalize the power sector. We have it because the old law was not intended to do that. It was meant just to bring about reforms. We have the new law. We also push for consolidation of the regulations. I said the power sector was over-regulated. We had regulations on this, regulation on that, and we advocated that we needed to streamline the respective regulations in the power sector in a kind of a bundle or two for efficiency and management. We've had that. Comprehensive power sector regulation, we've had that. Now is the stage for operationalization. I have a problem with that. The problem I have is this. I need to tell Nigerians as stakeholders, we are pushing federal government to gradually handle excessive funding of the power sector. It is not the responsibility, as the law stands today, it is not the sole responsibility of the federal government of Nigeria to invest, generate, transmit, and distribute electricity. And we are saying, federal government, if there is no electricity in Ogun State, you can ask Governor Adebayo. If there is no electricity in Oyo State, you can ask our very good friend, Governor Makinde. You can ask the governor of Bayelsa. You can ask the governor of Kogi. You can ask the governor of Borno. Why? Because all of them are supposed to come on board and make sure Nigerians have access to electricity. If federal government is not doing much, the state should do something. And it's not a question of digging your hands in your pocket. It's about how bankable, how cooperative you are operating or governing your state. If your state is efficient in terms of business, if your state is one that honors its contractual obligation, investors are going to come because there will be an indication. It will mean that your state is bankable, that your state is efficient, and your state is ready for business. Investors are going to come naturally. So investing in the power sector is not that you're going to dig your hands into your budgetary allocation to fund it. No. You're going to make sure your state is efficient in terms of governance, is transparent and efficient to procure things to have access to land is transparent, people are going to come and invest in the generation, transmission, distribution, and services. So it will get to a level which we are pushing. State A may be on 24-hour access to electricity. State B may be on 13 hours, while State C may be in total darkness. It's a question of how sincere, ready, and efficient the governors get to discharge their responsibility to their citizens. So you can't drop the challenges of the power sector at the table of the federal government. The era of that is gone. So we are saying what the law says, if there's no electricity in your state, be it generation, be it distribution, be it transmission, be it metering, be it related services, Nigerians should start to ask their state governor to give them access to electricity by going out to bring investors. Federal government will continue to do its bit, but we are saying federal government should stop excessive funding of the past so that they can use the money to fund national security, pay ASU, my own union, and others, fund education, and I will always ask for ASU. So give the money, the trillion that the federal government is spending.
But Prof, that's higher electricity tariff. That's higher electricity tariff for Nigerians. Why don't we wait for the states? Why don't we wait for the states to get their infrastructure right and structured first, and then we now tell the federal government to hands off because of what Nigerians are facing?
Yes, let me tell you. The way it was with this, if you don't push the states, they're not going to do something about that. I'm not. In as much as federal government may want to spend more for the transmission, it's fine. But I'm saying federal government should start to bring down the level of their funding and exposure to the power sector. I know the federal government will probably still spend relatively more because federal government is a stakeholder in the power sector to the tune of 40%. I understand that because of the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. I understand all those. But we are saying federal government should start to put up the red flag. State, I don't have money to fund the power sector because you are now in charge. You are your regulator. The sector, the regulatory institutions as advocated. Now the state should start to do. Some states will be okay with 5 megawatts, particularly in a particular region. Some states may be like 500 megawatts. We need to start to do targeted generation for specific areas. If federal government is not issuing the red signals to the state, they are not going to do much. Let me come back to the issue of increase in tariff for Nigeria. The answer is no. The answer is no because let's go back to what happened in the telecoms. You are saying if federal government gives small licenses to telecoms operators, then there will be increase in their tariffs. The answer is no. It brings competitiveness into the market, and it stirs up efficiency in terms of market. And I'm saying this, I've always said, an average Nigerian is willing to pay slightly more for electricity provided it is available. It will always be cheaper than generating through diesel and petrol. And Nigerians are now generating through batteries, we call it inverters, and solar. And you could see federal government stepping in to channel appropriate direction for the power sector. Federal government says, hey, you can't be importing solar panels into the country because Nigerians are spending hugely to procure solar panels. We can start to manufacture our solar panels in Nigeria.
Prof, let them give Nigerians power. We won't need to import. But I also wanted to chip in there that the stakeholders.
But it's not the federal government. It's not the federal government alone that will do it. If federal government had been trying to increase our generation to 20,000, and states like Bayelsa is doing 2,000, Borno is doing 500, Kaduna is doing 1,000. That's why I said we need to aggregate all these megawatts from all available sources. Some states are better efficient, are better positioned for windmills. Some can do extensive solar farms. Yeah. Some can do renewables. Some can, like we can't abandon the hydro. Kashimbila, Mambila, these are hydro projects that should have come on stream. Let's have these megawatts come from everywhere and any angle. So Nigerians need electricity to power their homes and businesses. Exactly. And I'm sure by the time we start to tax the state, there will be serious improvement in the power sector. But so far, so good. It's a success story.
At least we don't have any power grid collapse. Grid collapse. We have not had any this year.
We got to get to zero levels.
We pray.
Sustain the trend.
Okay. All right, Prof.
We'll get there.
All right, Professor Yemi Oke, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Professor of Energy, Electricity Law at the University of Lagos. Thank you so much. We share your optimism and to keep us hopeful.
We'll make Nigeria work. All of us will all make Nigeria work.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much and enjoy the holiday.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
All right, let's take a break now. When we come back, another important conversation awaits you right here on Business Morning. Please stay with us.